is positioned in a very focused manner only because it captures the paradox that not only Gandhi lived with in India, but which Hitler left behind as a legacy of hatred in Germany. It is romance that brewed across continents, but where the protagonist, Ayi Tendulkar, was the common thread, understanding, appreciating the nuances of not just a Western versus an Eastern culture, but more importantly, of his own commitment to a vast student community that wanted to go to Germany, which was then thwarted by Adolf Hitler's ascension to power.
A book that tells a love story and a story of history which runs between two countries, two continents, between Europe and India, specifically Germany and Maharashtra. Ayi Tendulkar, Laxmi's father, went to Germany in the 1920s to study, and while there met the filmmaker Fritz Lang and his wife Thea von Harbou, with whom he fell in love and whom he later married.
Thea von Harbou and Fritz Lang are famous for the wonderful black and white silent movies that they made. A few of them are Das Indische Grabmal, Dr. Mabuse, Metropolis, M, and Nebelungen. The film that is most famous is Metropolis, which is possibly the first science fiction film that was ever made.
When Fritz Lang had to leave Germany because he was suspected of having Jewish ancestry, Thea von Harbou stayed behind. She and Ayi Tendulkar married, but they didn't really marry because at that time in Germany, Germans could not marry non-Germans. So they lived together for about 7 years, and when things became uncomfortable for Indian students in Germany because of the growing pressure of Nazis on foreigners, he left for India, joined Gandhi's campaign, and became involved with the woman who was to become Laxmi's mother, and became involved with Gandhi. Both of them were Gandhian activists.
My father returned to India in 1939 and went to Belgaum before World War II broke out. In Belgaum, he started a newspaper called Varta. My mother, who had just returned from Sevagram, Gandhiji's ashram, had written an article on child labor in the beedi factories in Nepali. It was then when she got involved with my father, who had lived in Germany and had been married before. That upset my grandfather, who didn't like this involvement, and he asked her to leave the house. Eventually she left the house, and shortly thereafter the war started, and the British came and arrested my father. He became a political détenu because of his long association in Germany. Even though he had gone to prison, my mother stayed on in the village, helping the women, looking after the children. And my grandfather made several attempts to call her back. Finally, he realized that it was only if somebody like Gandhiji interceded on his behalf that would make her come home. He requested Gandhiji to write to her, and Gandhiji did so and called her to Sevagram for a meeting. She went to Sevagram, she met Gandhiji. She told him with absolute honesty and the whole story. And Gandhiji was a little upset. He said that you have sinned against society. And he gave her a punishment that she was not to meet my father for 5 years.
And it was Gandhi who married them after considerable discussion about whether he could marry two Brahmins or not, because by the time they came to be married, he had sworn only to marry Dalits. The amazing thing is that when they wanted to marry, The families were against it. That's not amazing because he was a much married man. But they wrote to Gandhi, and Gandhi actually, in the midst of all the things he was dealing with, took the time to involve himself in the marriage of these two people and advise them on whether or not they should marry, and tell them that they should, instead of marrying, the purpose of marriage was procreation, and they should actually first serve the nation, then procreate, and during that time, stay celibate.
When my parents got married, one of the letters that Gandhiji has written and which is in the book is these conditions that were put when finally they did get married. And in this letter, one of the conditions was she had to give her word that she would not have children till independence. In another letter, Gandhiji writes, "Beta, you have given me your word that you would not have children to independence. But what will happen if we don't get independence?" I think this one sentence absolutely shook me. Because this was, my parents got married in 45, so the letter was written early 44. This statement sort of gave me an idea that maybe our freedom fighters and our leaders were not as confident, or not confident that we would get freedom or we would come where we are. My parents' wedding was an unusual one. Gandhiji devised a ceremony made up of 7 sacrifices known as Sapta Yagna versus Saptapadi, which stands for the traditional 7 steps. Another feature which was very interesting was that the priest conducted the wedding ceremony was a Harijan who had been converted into Christianity.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
Once India got independence, my father got involved with setting up industry, and he started a cement factory in a place called Bagalkot in North Karnataka. He made several trips to Germany to order machinery from Krups, the German manufacturer. And it was at this time that he was able to reconnect with Thea von Harbou. Thea von Harbou expressed a desire to meet my mother and my brother, who was a 2-year-old infant.
Wife number 3 and wife number 4 meet, and they get along like a house on fire because they're both in love with this man, this very unusual man who is much married, and whose picture Thea von Harbou had on her wall all the time, along with the picture of the other man she admired, who was Adolf Hitler.
While writing this book, I have been able to gather some interesting documentation from various sources. Newspaper articles that my father had published in Berliner Tageblatt in German. He had been sent by the newspaper to cover events in India during the Quit India movement, and he reported on these, and they were very much appreciated by the German press. I was also able to get a copy of my father's PhD dissertation. I came to know that his topic was on the mortality rate in India. The most fascinating papers that I found were the Denazification certificate of Thea von Harbou. Once World War II was over, Berlin was divided into 4 quarters by the Allies. Thea von Harbou lived in a place called Charlottenburg in Berlin, and that area was given to the British. Because she had written various articles and a novel against the British and their actions in India, she was sent to a detention camp for 3 months. She also says in the Denazification certificate that she had joined the party because that gave her some status to help the Indians that were trapped in Berlin. The other papers which I found fascinating were documents which told me that my father had been involved with the independence of Goa from the Portuguese. I got to know this from various newspaper cuttings and also correspondence, letters that were written between my father and Gandhiji and my father and Sardar Vallabhai Patel.
Very few books capture romance through the corridors of history. Very few books are able to conjoin history, contemporary history, with relevant issues at that particular time and then still manage to weave an effective story. I think what Laxmi has done is remarkable. Many biographies of parents written by children become tributes in absentia. Children like to believe what they think of their parents through these biographies. But I think where Laxmi transcends that common mold is she's able to explain to people the dilemmas of romance when it is captured in contrast with a severe call of nationalism.